I've got all the secrets, and today I'm going to show you how to smoke barbecue ribs. Today we're going to use our fire torch to get our Weber Smoky Mountain up to temp. What I'm going to do is turn it on, bump up the flame, and I'm going to start right in the middle. Now for the next 45 seconds to a minute, I'm just going to hold this right in the middle, and we're trying to get these briquettes nice and hot. Our goal is to start from the inside and smoke outward. I know that I've done a lot of different methods here, but this is the one that we're going to go with today. And if you guys don't have one of these torches, that's completely fine. I will put a link in the description, but you can use fire starters, or you can also use the mini method by throwing some lit briquettes in the middle. And after 45 seconds to a minute, we're just going to put our Weber Smoky Mountain together. So the middle and the top is going to go on, and of course, we're going to open that front door. So when it comes to the Weber Smoky Mountain, you guys know that I'll use a few different methods. Today, the reason that we started the fire right in the middle is because of this water pan. With this water pan, I like to hug the left side. I've talked about it before. I don't know why it's the left side, but I do like to hug the left side. And all I want is for there to be consistent heat right in the middle of all of that charcoal. The reason being is because once we have our top grate, we can consistently rotate our food. That way we get some of it dripping over the coals and some of it protected. It's going to be really important in a little bit for us to rotate the food. Otherwise, the food that's over the hot coals can get a little bit darker than the food that's over the water. Now, in order to smoke good barbecue ribs, you have to start with a good rack of ribs. And here you can see we have some absolutely incredible looking spare ribs. We actually picked these up for competition, but it just ended up not working out for us. So today, we're going to end up making these for the family. Now, I prefer to season the backside first because the top is going to be by presentation. I want my ribs to look as good as possible. We're going to start with a layer of Killer Hogs TX rub on the back. Going to go pretty heavy here. This is going to bring salt, pepper, texture, and a lot of savoriness. And then we're going to go over top with Gulf Coast Smoke Trifecta. Now, this is our newest blend, and it has been doing so well all over the circuit, all over the backyard. Of course, there will be a link in the description for both of these seasonings. You guys can pick them up today. We're just going to go ahead and pat this in real quick. Then we'll go ahead and flip these over. And we're going to do the exact same thing on the top side. We'll let these sit outside for around 15 minutes to get into the meat, draw a little bit of moisture out, tack these rubs up, and then we're going to go right onto the Weber Smoky Mountain. It's been about 15 minutes on our charcoal. You can see it's nice and hot. We actually have a flame coming up right in the middle, and that's exactly what I want. So I have a chunk of pecan and post oak today. This is my favorite mixture for anything pork related. I'm going to go ahead and put it right in the middle. And I'm just going to adjust my pieces of wood, making sure it's on some nice hot white coals and making sure that those flames are touching those pieces of chunks. So I'm going to go ahead and put my door on now. All I'm going to do here is adjust my front bottom vent. The other two are completely closed, and I'll adjust this one about halfway open. Today, our goal with our Weber Smoky Mountain is to run anywhere from 275 to 300 degrees. If you guys have any other cooker, as long as you stay within those ranges, this recipe is going to work. Now it's time to put our ribs on the smoker. And as soon as I put them on, I like to push them together a little bit, and I like to make sure they're nice and straight. One of the truest things that I've ever heard is that these are going to cook exactly the way you put them on, so make sure they're nice and straight. What I like to do is separate my two favorite racks. This is kind of something I do in competition, not necessarily needing to do it today, but I like to separate my two separate racks so I know they're on opposite ends of each other. And then the one that, not necessarily I don't like, but the one that I don't care for as much, I'll always throw it in the middle. That way I know these are my two big racks. I really want to baby these. And the one in the middle, it's okay if it doesn't turn out absolutely perfect. But of course, our goal is to make some delicious smoked barbecue ribs today. We'll go ahead and put the lid over top. And now we're just going to wait and be patient with our barbecue ribs. My goal personally is to color these up and get them wrapped as soon as possible. So I really like a beautiful looking nice red rib, and one way to achieve that is to get to your color quickly and don't let them get too dark. So I'm hoping around 45 minutes or an hour in, we can actually have our rub nice and set on these ribs, and then we can wrap them up. It's been 15 minutes on our ribs. We want to take a look at them, see how they're doing. And you can see that we're already getting a really nice color. I love to see that black pepper come through on the ribs. That is one of my favorite things about cooking pork and barbecue in general. So what I'm going to do is, you can see one side of these ribs is exposed to that hotter heat. The other side, being my left side, is going to be the one with the water pan under it. we're going to rotate this. So what I want to do is I just want to get my grate and I want to spin it until the side that was just exposed is now over the side that is completely covered by the water pan. That's going to ensure that the bottom of my ribs are going to look as good as the top. Now, if this was a competition, I would probably clean that up right there in these little spots, but we're cooking in the backyard today, so it's going to be completely fine. Now, the ribs look really good, but I do want to go ahead and apply some spritz here. So one of the things I've been doing lately is actually adding a little bit of flavor with my spritz. So here I've got 2 cups of water, 1/4 cup of maple syrup, and 1/4 cup of apple cider vinegar. I'm just going to go really lightly over my ribs, nothing too crazy. Now we'll go ahead and put our lid back on. And this is exactly what we're going to do with our ribs until it's time to flip them. Recently, when I'm cooking on my drum or my Weber Smoky Mountain, I really like to flip my ribs over for about 15 minutes or so. I'll show you how to do that in just a bit. It's been about an hour. We've been rotating our ribs consistently and spritzing as needed, and it's just about time to wrap. But the last thing that I like to do before we do that is flip these over for about 15 minutes. You can see that so far the ribs are looking really, really good. It's only been about an hour, but all of that rub is sticking really, really nice from here. It doesn't necessarily look dry, but the rub does look like it is nice and secure on this rib. So I'm going to flip it over. We're going to put these face down. And kind of like I mentioned earlier, I want the top of the rib and the bottom of the rib both to look really, really good. You can see the color here is amazing. So far, a nice deep mahogany, and that's exactly what we're going for today. So it's going to be 15 minutes meat side down, and then we're going to wrap these up. And this is exactly what they're looking like when we're taking them off of the Weber Smoky Mountain. You can see there's a little bit of that grill mark right there. That's not worrying me at all. That'll all get covered up here in just a little bit. At this point of the cook, it's time to wrap. I have no idea what the internal temperature is on my ribs, and at this point, I do not care at all. What I'm doing is I'm adding flavor and moisture into this wrap. So we're going to start with 2 sticks of butter. Then what I like to do, same thing I do in competition, is I start to kind of wrap this up just a little bit. What that allows me to do is create like a little pocket here where I don't lose any of my liquids. So we're going to add 2/3 cups of chicken broth. It's only been an hour, but if you guys look real closely, I'm pouring this over top and it's not removing any of that rub. What I'm actually trying to do is soften it just a little bit on top. I don't want too hard of a bark on my ribs. Then we're gonna go right over top of the ribs with a nice stripe of Killer Hogs vinegar sauce. And what I like to do from here is actually lightly, gently paint this into my rib. I'm trying my best to make sure that I'm just tapping the sauce in and not actually brushing it, because again, I don't want any of that bark to remove from our ribs. If you need some extra moisture, you can grab some of that chicken broth and you can tap it right on top. And then we're going to go over top with a light layer of sugar in the raw, and then we're also going to put some in the sides here. And then we're going to go ahead and wrap everything up, meat side up, bone side down. Wrap everything nice and tight. I like to make 2 little handles here. And it's going to go back into the smoker exactly like this. Now, I get asked quite often, why do I actually like to wrap my ribs with the bones down? And to me, it's because I am trying to create a really flavorful au jus out of these ribs. So the barbecue sauce, the chicken broth, the butter, and the sugar in the raw all makes for a really delicious finishing on top of these ribs. Add in the bones, and I just feel like it pulls some of that flavor out of those bones. And I feel like that's one of the reasons why we are so consistent when it comes to our ribs. Try it out on your next cook and let me know what you think. And now with everything wrapped in on the smoker, we're going to keep rotating every 15 minutes. Just because we're no longer looking for color does not mean that we want to cook these unevenly. So after an hour, we're going to start checking for tenderness and see where we're at. It's been an hour. After 2, maybe 2.5, these ribs should be close to done. It's been 2 hours and 45 minutes on our wrapped ribs, and we've been checking them consistently. We checked them about 15-20 minutes ago, and we knew they were close, but they needed just a little bit more. So let's go ahead and check them one more time. I want to show you guys what I'm looking for when these are done, and if we need to, we're going to take them off. And if you actually look right here in this wrap, you'll notice that there's some bubbling that's coming off of these bones. And that's exactly what I was talking about earlier. I feel like a lot of flavor is now going to be in this au jus. So if you think about somebody making a beef, chicken, or a pork stock, you're always using the bones in order to get the natural flavor of the pork or whatever it is into that stock. And that's exactly what I think we do here. I'm just going to go ahead and probe right in between the bones here. You guys can see that I'm reading right around 209, 210 on these ribs. And I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, oh, that's too high. But I guarantee you these still have a great feel to them, and they're not falling off the bone. This is exactly what I'm looking for. If I was at a competition right now, I would still keep pushing these to about 214. Don't forget, we're in Texas. It is a lot different than a KCBS. And at this point, we are completely done with our ribs. If you wanted to, you could rest them into your Cambro for up to 3 hours. We've done it for quite a long time at multiple competitions. You could also put it inside your oven with no heat on. It's insulated in there, and you could also warm them in there as well. What we're going to do today is we're going to throw these in our Cambro until it's time to eat. We'll come back when we're slicing these up. At this point, our ribs are completely cooked, but we're still going to add some flavor over top. So what we're going to do first is we're going to drain out the au jus from each rack of ribs. Don't forget, this is a little bit of butter, sugar in the raw, chicken broth, and that Killer Hogs vinegar sauce. And like I mentioned earlier, this should have a delicious pork flavor from those bones that we're cooking and all that goodness. And the reason we wanted to put this into a grease separator is so all the fat comes to the top. We're not going to actually mix that in and put it back on our ribs. So I'm going to go with 2 cups of our au jus. And you always want to make sure that you're tasting. So let's make sure that this tastes good, a little mix. Flavor is absolutely out of this world. I get a nice natural pork flavor, and of course, all that sweet and savory comes through. Next up, we're going to add a cup of Killer Hogs, the barbecue sauce. Then we're going to go ahead and mix everything together. You guys can see that this is pretty loose. No big deal. We definitely don't necessarily need a thick glaze on top. This is still going to taste out of this world. Now, if you take a look at these ribs, they look incredible exactly the way they are. It is our decision to add this sauce. If you guys don't want to, eat them exactly like this. Now what we're going to do is put our ribs right back onto the smoker. I just want these to get a little bit dry on top before we add that sauce. We'll let these tack up for around 10 minutes or so before we start applying. After a few minutes, we're going to go ahead and apply some of our glaze. You guys can see I'm not actually brushing it on. I'm just letting it drip all over. And this actually elevates the look of these to another level. They looked delicious and amazing before, and now I would say they look even better. Still has a beautiful barbecue sauce look, but you guys know that there's a lot of that au jus. It's actually a 50-50 blend here. I like them bones to look good too. We'll throw a little glaze over top of those. And we're just going to go ahead and do the rest of these. This right here would also probably be my biggest rib secret, is do not throw away all that au jus that you created in that wrap. You know, one of the hardest things to do is to make a really, really good au jus. And I say that because a lot of people will burn it. They'll turn up the temperatures when their ribs are ready to wrap, and they won't think about the au jus and the beautiful flavor that they can get there. So keep that in mind. I know that sometimes you want to get these done quickly, but it's always best, in my opinion, to keep even temps. Keep a water pan if needed. Rotate the rack and preserve that au jus. It can add for such a beautiful natural flavor to these ribs, which I really think is going to hit it home. And if you guys are cooking on the competition trail, I definitely think this will help you as well. Now for the slicing, and to make sure that we cooked these ribs properly, you could flip them over if you wanted. But a little trick I can tell you is if you look at the meat that's propping up in between these bones, if you follow that, you should go right between the bones every single time. Rib should be full of moisture. It should be nice and tender. I haven't seen it yet, but I can tell you that it feels pretty dang good in my hand. Now, of course, it looks good, but how is the bite and how does it taste? That is such a good rib. That is such a good rib. It's been months since we've had a standard backyard rib, and I just forgot how absolutely incredible this is. The bite and the texture is so much different than something that I would turn in at a competition, but there's still a clean bite here. I hope you can see how easy it is for me to bite that in the camera. I really hope that comes through. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to grab some of that glaze, hit it on both sides, and see how it comes out. so good. So delicious. Got a clean bone. That's genuinely just a delicious rib. If you make these ribs, I guarantee you 100% anybody that you feed them to is absolutely going to think that you are a backyard legend, warrior. The best names in the book. These are incredible. You've absolutely got to try them. As always, did I just squeak? We really appreciate you guys tuning into this video. Why is it getting so dark so early? It's literally like 6:30. Thanks, and we'll see you on the next one.